Fantastic.
All right.
Fantastic.
I think we're almost good to go. Yeah, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, welcome, council colleagues and members of staff, and of course, members of the public. Tonight, we're starting with our Committee of Adjustments. So, I'll ask a council colleague to read the land acknowledgement. Does anyone have the land acknowledgement in front of them? Okay, Councillor Strakian, go ahead.
The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the territory of the Anishinaabe. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship, and we commit to Indigenous-informed decision-making to foster the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you. So we're going to declare the Committee of Adjustment meeting open, and I'll ask council colleagues if there's any disclosure of interest in regards to perceived or real financial benefit or loss arising from Committee of Adjustment applications forthcoming this evening. Seeing none, I will move on to approval of the minutes. And we're looking for approval of the minutes from May 8th, and that was the Committee of Adjustment hearing. Can I just get a mover and a seconder by show of hands? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wilson, thank you. And I will call the question. All in favor, please? You can raise your hands. Thank you. All right, so now we're proceeding to our Committee of Adjustment application for 690 Monkman Road. The Committee of Adjustment will now discuss application number A1323 for Mirko Birth on lands located at 690 Monkman Road, part lot 6, concession 2, concession 9, geographic township of Oxford-on-Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville. The request is in regards to relief from the 500-meter setback from an open landfill site at the subject property. The matter was deferred at the time of the public hearing on May 8th. Debbie Wood is here, as Secretary Treasurer, to keep a record summary of this meeting. Welcome, Debbie. And we have Mr. Mosher, the Deputy Director of Planning and Development, who will give an update on the application for 690 Monkman. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. In terms of this application, it did come before the committee on May the 8th. Since that time, there's been a number of events that have taken place, and they are detailed in the supplemental staff report that's been prepared. I won't go through all of those item by item, but suffice to say, there's been quite a bit of back and forth. I think the key points for this evening is that although the application was originally deferred pending additional testing, we did receive some additional testing from the applicant, but there was no indication that that information had been provided by a qualified professional, a hydrogeologist, in compliance with standard hydrogeological parameters and practices. So subsequent to that information coming just this week, we did receive an opinion, this is not in my report, from Mr. Booth's hydrogeologist, and I don't wish to overly simplify it, but in his opinion, the testing was carried out appropriately and the matters should be addressed. So we received that on Monday and we sent it to Jennifer Gorell for her to review. She's been our peer reviewer on this file. So Jennifer Gorell did peer review that information and maintained her opinion that at this point in time, we don't, staff would not, in her opinion, have enough information to say that it's been completed in accordance with the standard procedures and practices through procedures that the ministry has established for water testing in this kind of an instance. I think the things I'd like to focus on mainly are that in terms of the provincial policy statement, this was discussed in the previous report, but I just wanted to reiterate that it's the statement that kind of is the overarching statement for my rationale or my opinion. And its requirement is that when you're having development, even if it's a single development, that there be a demonstration of no negative impacts. And that's being defined by the province as including potential risks to human health and safety, even due to a single development. the province does establish procedures for water quality testing, and that's primarily through procedure D55, which is a subdivision suite of parameters that are tested. It's intended that when those parameters are being advanced, and you can still use them even on a single development, that a hydrogeologist is carrying out the testing, preparing a report, interpreting results, and recommending mitigation. Other procedures are established by the province, and those are especially important when you're going to be trying to establish a development within 500 meters of a landfill site. And those procedures are D4 and B7. With the information that we've received, it does not appear that there's any proposed mitigation for the retroactive establishment of this home. And that would normally be something that would be an expectation to be provided by a qualified professional as part of any hydrogeological report in support of this proposed development. Again, there's no indication that the procedures have been followed. Now, supplemental information we received from Hubley Geosciences Limited did indicate that, in his opinion, he thought that the procedures in the way that they were described to him had been carried out in a manner that he would think is okay. I don't mean to be overly simplistic in saying that. We did ask Jennifer Gorell if she agreed with that, and she said no, because when you're trying to do something like this, it's important to ensure that the standards, the practices, the procedures when it comes to human health and safety are being followed. It's not to say a person, like an individual, couldn't do their own water quality testing, but the province does have these procedures in place, and North Grenville's own official plan refers to that when you're developing near a landfill site, that it's an expectation that there's a professional who's providing that information and validating. Minor variances are supposed to meet 4 tests in order to be considered to be approved by a committee of adjustment. And they are, is the application meeting the intent of the official plan, the zoning bylaw, is it minor, and does it represent good land use planning? And so, in my opinion, this matter, this proposed retroactive establishment of the dwelling would not meet the 4 tests. It's not meeting the intent of the official plan. We haven't received categorical information from a qualified professional substantiating all methods and procedures that have been used to demonstrate that there's no negative impacts from the development. So I don't think that the section 4.6 of our official plan has been met. The intent of our zoning bylaw with a 500-meter setback is to establish a area of review when development's proposed within these types of areas. And specifically procedures D55 and D4 and B7 say that if it's a sensitive use, there's a certain level of care and caution that needs to be exercised. So the official plan doesn't say, here's how you reduce a setback from a landfill, but we typically rely upon the standards that the ministry establishes and go back to our official plan again. And so the 500-meter setback as a standard in our zone bylaw is because of our official plan, which is because of ministry practice and guidelines. And so I don't think in my opinion that enough information has been provided to substantiate a reduction in that 500-meter setback. Is the application minor? I've got to conclude, in my opinion, no, it's not. It would retroactively establish a sensitive land use adjacent to this waste disposal facility, and we don't have a fulsome understanding of health implications or satisfactory evidence to demonstrate no negative impacts. And would it represent good land use planning and appropriate? And again, no. Again, there's no demonstration of no negative impacts. It's not been done in keeping with the official plan policies, and it doesn't respect the 500-meter setback. So for these reasons, I would have to say no. So my recommendation to the committee is that this application be refused because it does not meet the tests for minor variance. And that concludes the report, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, great. I'll just look to council first for any questions they might have. Deputy Mayor, go ahead, and you can use the raise hands function. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Deputy Director Mosher. D55, how long has that been on the books, and is it updated regularly?
I'm not familiar with how long the procedure has been in place, but I've known of it since I've been a land use planner.
And how long have you been a land use planner, Phil?
Since 2012.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Mr. Mosher. Thank you for your report and your objective opinions. I just want to clarify in my mind, the 500-meter setback is from the boundary or the property line where the waste management or the dump, whatever we want to call it, the landfill site is. And when I went back through all the notes, it said that the house that was built without a permit, approximately 2019, is only 40 meters from that, from the property line of the landfill site. Is that correct? And that the well that was drilled in 2016 is only 33 meters away from the border of that landfill site. Is that correct?
Thank you for the questions. No, it's not correct. The license boundary is the area that the setbacks applied to. So the license boundary is where landfill waste was accepted. In addition to that, there's also a contaminant attenuation zone, and that's some land that has previously been purchased by North Grenville. It's not part of the landfill itself per se. Setback's not applied to it. If you were to take a rough measure of where is the home and well located in proximity to the boundary of the landfill, it's about 160 meters, although it is a little bit closer to the contaminant attenuation zone. So I think that's the value that you're deriving there.
So 160 meters versus 500. So it's significantly less than even half.
Mr.
Yeah,
Mosher?
it's about 160 meters.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions, council colleagues? Seeing none, we certainly at this point can hear from the applicant. Questions from the applicant or further questions from council should be asked through me as chair. So I don't know at this stage if the applicant wishes to offer any comment before we move to consideration of a motion.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because I think I've lost my video feed. So certainly I have a fair bit of questions and concerns, as usual. If you recall my frustration that I exhibited at the last session, it continues. If we also recall how the last meeting ended, I was to get 15 parameters tested, and that was essentially supposed to be the final sets. If you recall, I kept my frustration was largely about the moving goalposts and how the requirements kept changing. And it was very clear. Karen read off the 15 parameters that were to be tested. Diligently, I went out and tested them the very next day, those 15 parameters. 1 week later, before my test results even came back, I was added, there was another bunch of requirements added once again to the testing parameters, which again wasn't agreed to during the council meeting. They were VOCs, and then there was there was an email sent by Karen to me laying out what the requirements were. I know that Phil talked about how the testing was supposed to be done. In Karen's email, it was very clear that I am to contact the lab to get instructions on how to perform the test and how long to run the water and this and that. There was no mention at any time, and even during the presentation at the last council meeting, from the past test I did. So we're talking about who's filling the bottles to the fill line. This isn't rocket science. By the way, I have an MBA from one of the most prestigious schools in North America. I also have a top secret clearance, so there's some consideration. It seems that there was some indication that perhaps there were nefarious things happening in the background. I also have top secret clearance with the federal government, so I'm not risking that to fudge around with water results because there was some indication that that might be occurring. So this is not rocket science. When they're asking me to fill water bottles to a fill line, that I have to, and if you also recall that during that session, they said the testing would cost about $200. Well, a hydrologist costs about $150 an hour. And for me to bring a hydrologist out, it would be a full day to run the water for 3 hours, to drive out there, to pick out the water samples and to do everything else. So that's over $1,000 just for that one day. So that was a little bit disingenuous to suggest that the testing would cost $200. When I called the Ontario Public Health for directions also and confirmation on how to do sampling, they have a website, and I believe I sent that to council as well, that you can verify yourself, where they give specific instructions on how to do it and which labs are certified. I used the labs to certify it. So I did the, again, these moving requirements. So I did the metals test, the VOC test, all the tests, and everything came back as we discussed at the last meeting. If everything came out without any issues, that would be the final hurdle. But here we are, despite my hydrologist's report saying that everything is fine, that he's comfortable with how the sampling was done. Again, this is not rocket science. Anyone who lives in a rural area knows how to fill a bottle to do their E. coli test and their bacteria test. And by the way, the provincial guidelines on how to do the testing is also for contaminants, so the same type of contaminants we're talking about. My concern is that the information that's been provided, there's a lot of noise happening in this, and I know that some people might say it's conjecture, but that in the procedure, by the way, procedure 5D55, it's intended for developments with 6 or more residents. It's not intended for a single dwelling. I just want to make sure that that's perfectly clear. And also, we're in this circular argument where we're talking about the D5 instructions and the planning documents that everyone's supposed to refer to. Everything is based on the Ministry of Environment. All these 500-meter setback guidelines are based on the Ministry of Environment guidelines. So we're kind of picking and choosing, cherry picking what it is that we wish to listen to and what we choose to ignore. Because if you recall last time, the Ministry of Environment has already said they have no issue with me building on the property, that they are completely comfortable that all contaminants are contained. I've tested probably 150 different parameters now, and we keep digging deeper and deeper. There are no issues with any of the parameters. There are some that aesthetically are not necessarily the best. However, one could look at the township's own well testing that they do, and there are wells within the township, public wells that are supplying water that have very comparable sodium levels. They have very comparable hardness levels, and yet somehow I'm stuck in this merry-go-round where there's never an end to this. And in fact, the requirements have even gotten much sterner since our last meeting, when those were supposed to be the final requirements, which I met 100% of the time. Which leads me to responsibilities. And I know I've sent out an email to council as well about the conflict of interest that this situation finds itself in, where the approver of a development is also the potential contaminator of the lot that they're looking to approve. This is a clear conflict of interest situation. If we are looking at other provincial guidelines as well, there's guideline B-7-1, which talks about the landfill owner responsibilities. I know I've sent council that information as well, and that the burden is on the landfill owner not to contaminate the groundwater of any neighboring property and to maintain it at reasonable use for any adjacent property. And if they fail to do that, it is the owner of the landfill's responsibility to mitigate it. Yet somehow the burden keeps being pushed back to me as the homeowner. Another point is that guideline C5, which is the certificate of approval for the waste disposal site. There are some clear issues there as well in the certificate for approval and the obligations of the owner and operator of the site. And they talk about buffer zones and whether it's a buffer zone that's owned by the town, the landship owner, or if it's a neighboring property that they're using as a buffer zone, and what the requirements are there. None of this is in compliance, and it's a complete violation. And I would argue that all of this that I'm going through is completely indicative of bureaucracy and bureaucratic overreach, because I'm diligently trying to follow everything, and yet every time I clear one hurdle, but two more arise. And I'm not sure how this has anything to do with affordable housing, because the money I've spent on this, the frustration, I've already lost a building year. I'm trying to build a home to put my senior parents in that are right now in a townhouse where there's stairs that are dangerous to them, and build a bungalow that's one story to make it safer for them. But now I've lost an entire season, building season, so it's going to be deferred yet another year. And even the issues that are raised with the hardness and the sodium, I've already talked about how wells within the township have levels very comparable to what my property is showing, that the hydrologist suggests is very uncommon in the area. Yet it seems that there are wells within the township's management that's serving the public that are very comparable levels. And even some of the criteria that's listed that my hydrologist was supposed to answer, these 3 questions that he was supposed to answer, were kind of out there. So the first question is quite simple: is the water safe to consume? And my hydrologist lays that out very clearly in his response. The second question that's requested about whether the contaminants that are possibly in the well are natural, or so when I'm talking about the sodium and the hardness, or are they man-made? Essentially, just translating the information. And my hydrologist and common sense dictates this is a red herring, because it's not a health concern. So now we're worried about trying to do some sort of analysis as to the origins of the sodium, as an example, that are not a health concern. So we have to, this is completely nuts that this is part of my requirement to trace back something that's not a health concern as to the origins of whether it's a man-made sodium parameter that's slightly elevated, or if it's naturally occurring, and to provide proof from that, which is an unrealistic objective to put in front of someone. And also the third criteria, I guess, to get this accepted was to determine what the future risk to the well is. Well, that's also quite frustrating, because first off, if there is contamination on my site and it originates from the landfill site, guidelines B71 is very clear that it would be the landfill owner that would be responsible for mitigation. Yet somehow I'm supposed to put a plan together if there's contamination that's coming from the landfill site. This whole world here is backwards as far as who's the responsibility. And part of that is, again, this conflict of interest. As the power shift has happened from the township is the one who's the approver and the potential contaminator. So you could see that the motivation here is that I will never get approved for this request, because that way you can never be accused of contaminating my property because I could never use it. So that's the way you're turning this around to de-risk the liability.
And
And
Mr.
this is
Booth, if I
completely
could, we do have 3 additional applications this evening, so if I could ask you to take a couple of minutes to wrap up your statements, and then we'll go back to council colleagues and staff before considering the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. I was essentially done.
Great.
However, I want to go back to the commitment we made at the last council meeting, which was very simple. And your mayorship, you asked Karen specifically what's left outstanding. She gave the specific answer. I not only did that, I went out of my way to do the other VOC test to show my goodwill for all this. I did that. It came again. There was nothing that was even detectable in those samples. And not only that, then I agreed to meet with the township's hydrologist, with my hydrologist, to discuss a compromise. There is no compromise. There is no such thing as a peer review in this situation. Because of the power situation, this isn't a compromise between two professionals. It's my way or the highway from the township side. And that is incredibly frustrating. And again, it's because there is a conflict of interest situation here. So
Right.
I'm wrapped up. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And of course, allegations of conflict have very particular connotations. Obviously, we're dealing with some provisions in our official plan that limit or constrain certain kinds of proposals. And, obviously the municipality has a responsibility to only make exceptions where there's extremely strong rationale. So when we talk about conflict, I just want to be clear that I'm not sure that the way you're invoking conflict is the way that we would understand conflict, but accept that you believe that the municipality may be acting in its own interest. And I think, in fact, that may be what our responsibilities are to all of our residents. But that being said, I see Councillor Sullivan's hand. I'm going to ask council colleagues if they have any other questions, and I'm going to go back to Mr. Mosher, and then we're going to address the recommendation that's been made this evening. Just cognizant that there are others waiting, and we have other public meetings this evening. So if you'd like to ask a question, council colleagues, please put up your hand and I'll recognize you. Councillor Sullivan.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Mr. Booth. I just want to clarify that I know all the facts correctly, and to let you know that I am sympathetic to your frustrations. But I'm also a registered nurse, and health and safety are critical to me. And water is a resource that is critical to life, and I am not prepared to take a chance on water. So the tests have been done as a point in time. There's risks down the road, as we learned at the last meeting, and I went through and digested. I'm not a hydrologist by any means, and I did my best to review all of the documentation that I have read. So I want to clarify, I believe this 500-meter no-build area was put in, has been established for a reason to ensure safety and good health and safe water all the time around a landfill site, a previous landfill site. So I understand that the house you have is about 160 meters from the landfill site, therefore less than halfway. I assume the well is somewhere in that same less than halfway area. Can you tell me when you built this house, when the house that's there?
So okay. So just to be clear, I didn't build a house. I bought the property. But it was built in two stages, approximately 2010 and 2015.
Someone built this house without a permit and dug a well, and you bought the property. Did you know this when you bought the property? I
did, yes.
Okay. All right. So
I did meet with city staff prior to. I did my due diligence. I talked to the Ministry of Environment. I talked to the Rideau Conservation Authority. I talked to staff at the township. I did my due diligence for this. Absolutely.
So you knew that there was a 500-meter and no build zone, and that there was an illegal house on there. You also mentioned recently single dwelling, and then you have also mentioned that you want to build more houses or more dwellings on the property. So you already have one there that really shouldn't be there, and now you're wanting to build more. So I'm a little bit puzzled as to, knowing that there's a 500-meter no build zone, why you're looking to do this. Actually, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, fair question. Absolutely. So again, in my due diligence, in talking to staff, that The process was to put forward a minor variance request, and with the regulations for building properties on a single lot, you're allowed to build up to 3 residents on a single lot. So this was all possible, all doable. And again, I've also talked to the folks who created the landfill study, and I talked to the Ministry of Environment, the person who signed off on the landfill study that said all contaminants are contained within the landfill site, and in the buffer area, the part that's within that 50 meters. So just to be clear with the buffer area, I'm talking about the land I don't own, but as part of the landfill site. In that, the 2 wells that are within 50 meters of my property, that those wells show that the water is already drinking water standard.
That's
And again,
okay.
this landfill site has not been operational since 1999. And typically by now, anything that was going to pass through it would not get worse. It's only going to get better from there.
Oh, I understood, if my memory serves me correctly, from the last meeting we were at, that the hydrologist had said that a significant rainfall, significant weather event like that could actually alter the leachate from that. That's my recollection. But my question is, you knew there was a 500-meter no-build area. Who gave you the impression that it was okay to continue to build more dwellings on the site?
Okay, so sorry, just to clear, it's not a no build area. It's a study area. Okay, I just want to make sure that that's perfectly clear, because that's a pretty important point. It's not that you cannot build. The ministry says that leachates can travel up to 500 meters, so it's a study area. But in this case, the same ministry that says it's a study area said, we studied it and we know you're okay to build.
Okay,
Did that,
yeah, go ahead, Councillor Sullivan.
was that advice passed on to planning and building in municipality of North Grenville? Because I'm not aware that they received that information.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I'm going to go to any other council colleague, and we'll ask Mr. Mosher, obviously, to provide any supplementary comments at the end. Any other questions from council colleagues? All right. So Mr. Mosher.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Deputy
I'm
Mayor. Go
always
ahead.
slow to step up, but
It's okay.
it's because I'm considering whether to weigh in or not. I sense your frustration, Mr. Bluth, Mirko. We've been talking about this for quite a long time, and I think what's very difficult for you to accept that you're here, we have the authority to say yay or nay. So as you characterized it, you know, it's our way or the highway. We rely on staff. We're not experts in this field, and staff relies on third-party confirmation or third-party advice or review. And I think that's in a nutshell. I mean, I rely on staff to provide us advice and recommendations, and I tend to accept it, not a priority, not necessarily at face value. I've been known to ask a lot of questions and try and educate myself about this, but I'm no expert in this, and so I have to rely on staff to make a judgment. And I can tell you right now that, you know, I'll be moving to accept staff's recommendation. So I sense your frustration. You've been very respectful, very persistent. I mean, God bless you. You've certainly tried to make your case, but when push comes to shove, you're here in front of us to make a decision, and we're going to make a decision one way or another. I'm not saying I'll be supported in my motion, but that's the way I feel.
Yeah. If I may, John, just jump into thank you for your honesty and forthrightness. So what I would ask folks to contemplate is again, there's been 6 professionals that have looked this over. 5 of them has said there are no issues, that the contaminants are contained. 1 has had one has had a different opinion. Well, two questions. So ask yourself, what is it about? So they're all very well educated in the exact same field. This is not an exact science. I'll grant that. 5 of them have one opinion, one has another. What is it that makes one person's opinion 100% correct and the other 5 0% correct? And also, if you listen to the language in the report, the previous report and this, it really came down to seemingly who poured the water in the bottles,
So I
among
think,
other things.
Mr. Booth, just to stay
Yes.
focused, the reality is we've been meeting on this issue for nearly 40 minutes. I don't appreciate conjecture at this stage. We are all trying to be professionals in terms of how we reach a decision. We've heard from our staff. We've heard a lot of your comments. We've received some questions from my council colleagues. I'm now going to bring it over to Mr. Mosher. He's going to provide some additional comments. This isn't a public meeting, so we did want to give you an opportunity, of course, as the applicant, to provide, additional perspective and comments. But at this stage, I'm going to Mr. Mosher for some additional reflections now that he's heard us ask you some questions and you've been able to provide some of your commentary. Mr. Mosher? Perhaps if you wish to comment on what appears to be competing understandings of whether or not the ministry has approved or greenlit or signaled no issue with potential water quality on this site, maybe it would be beneficial for any other member of the public for you to speak to that and anything else that you deem relevant at this stage.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't really have a comment on the MECP part. I understand that Karen Dunlop, the CAO, had conversations with them and they indicated that they would not object to building, but that didn't mean that they wouldn't have concerns. I've never seen categorical evidence that they didn't. I am not a hydrogeologist. I am a land use planner. I know a little about the field, and I think that when there's areas of expertise outside our scope, it's incumbent upon us as professionals to solicit that expert advice from someone who's not in our field. And we've done that with Jennifer. And Jennifer helped, I think, me to understand that at the end of the day, it's North Grenville's official plan to be met. And North Grenville's official plan is one component of the tests of variance. And in my opinion, satisfactory evidence by qualified professionals has not been provided to demonstrate no negative impacts or consistency with North Grenville's official plan. And for that reason, I think all the other tests fail. And I believe that's all I have to add.
Thank you. Ms. Dunlop, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have correspondence in regards to the MOE, but it's similar to what Mr. Mosher has indicated. The ministry did say that they would not hold back any applications for a building permit. They didn't say that the water is safe to drink. They did not say that they would put a hold on it. So there was a process that still had to be followed. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So I'm going to bring us to the recommendations from staff, and that is that the Committee of Adjustment refuse application A1323 because the requested variance does not meet the intent of North Grenville's official plan, does not meet the intent of the comprehensive zoning bylaw, is not representative of appropriate and desirable development, and is not minor in nature. Of course, it's council's prerogative to reject or accept those recommendations. So I'm looking for a mover to advance the recommendations that have been offered this evening, or do something contrary to those recommendations. Deputy Mayor, are you moving the recommendations? I'm sorry, you are muted. A classic Zoom problem.
How soon we
Deputy
forget.
Mayor?
Yes, yeah, I will move the motion.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to look for a seconder for that motion, please. Okay, Councillor Sullivan. All right, so council colleagues, any other comments or concerns in regards to the recommendations as presented this evening? Yes, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if we were assuming that this is voted
In the event
down,
that the
in the
motion
event
carries,
that it
yes.
is in the
Yeah.
event that it is voted down, then I'm guessing it would go to Land Tribunal, and their level of experts would be the final decision makers. Is that correct? So Mr. Booth has another opportunity to.
I'm not sure that's correct with Committee of Adjustment, so I'd have to
Okay,
defer to
no.
Mr. Mosher in terms of possible recourse. Mr. Mosher?
Possible recourse would be the Ontario Land Tribunal if chosen by Mr. Booth.
Okay, all right, great.
Thank
So
you.
that clarifies your
So we're
question.
not dead ending and we're just moving it up to another level for their experts to make a final decision.
So I think it would be at Mr. Booth's discretion.
Discretion,
I think we're
absolutely.
moving it up. In fact, with the motion on the table, should it carry, I think we are concurring with our municipal staff that this doesn't represent good land use planning and that there may be risk involved, as you've mentioned, to the health and safety of the property owner. But of course,
If I might jump
I'm
in
sorry.
can I
I'm
jump
so
in with the
sorry.
last?
Yes,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. With a motion on the table as chair, I have an obligation, Mr. Booth, to call the question, and certainly I can then give you one last opportunity. Any other questions from council colleagues? We have a motion on the floor. Yes, Councillor Strachan.
I'm Mayor Peckford, and I think through you to Mr. Booth, I think we're hearing that this is, not a standard situation, that there are a lot of complexities to this. There's a lot of interpretation, responses from the province are what they are. They don't tell us exactly what can be done. They don't complete the whole story. So that makes it additionally sort of challenging to use what they have said as well. I think that in my experience, there are expertise that we need to rely upon because council is not here to pretend or say anything along the lines of professional opinions regarding hydrogeology or even appropriate land use planning and so on. We have plans and so on, and I think with the we'll call them rules that are in place in various areas, we don't have a lot of flexibility in here, other than to say, we either agree with professionals that are certainly more qualified to provide some answers in these areas than we are, and to go against that would, I think, be saying that we don't trust the judgment of professionals. And I think that's a very challenging position in. I've certainly been in a position like this in other capacities and other positions that I fill as a result of being on council, and it is not comfortable for anyone. But I think when it comes down to it, when you aren't the expert, you have to defer to the expert opinion. So I think that is my thought on the situation, but I wanted to recognize that it doesn't mean that the decision is taken lightly or is that it is easy for any of us, speaking for myself, that it is not easy for me to make a decision that would be seen as less favorable to you as well.
Right, any other comments from council colleagues before I call the question? I'm not seeing any, so I'm calling the question. All in favor of the motion that's been moved? All right, it carries. Thank you. We appreciate that this has been a complex issue, and that I think staff and Mr. Booth have done a lot of work to bring this matter to Committee of Adjustment. And unfortunately, sometimes they don't always go the way of the applicant, and such as municipal government. But we certainly appreciate all of the time expended. And Mr. Booth, as noted, you have recourse should you wish to pursue it. I'm going to move on at this stage. We have no other matter this evening, Ms. Wood, is that correct? Okay, so then at this time, I'd like to receive a motion, a mover and a seconder for adjournment, please. Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Wilson. All right, I'm calling the question on adjournment. Thank you. All right, the meeting is adjourned, and we now have to transition into a council meeting. And Ms. Preston, are we on the same link or a different link?
We'll maintain the same link, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so then I'm just going to ask for 2 minutes, please, before we transition. I'm just going to get the right paperwork for the next meeting. So if anyone needs to stand up briefly, you're free to do so. I'll just be right. Okay. If we have all of council back, then we're going to move into our council meeting.
I just note that we're waiting for Councilor O'Sullivan for a
Oh,
moment,
thanks.
Madam Mayor.
Okay, thanks. So once again, I think we have everyone now. Is that correct? Yes. Ah, there's Councilor Sullivan. All right. Of course, this meeting is being streamed live. We are now convening our council meeting for Wednesday, June 19th at 6:30 p.m. Just a quick reminder before we call this meeting to order that we do have a cooling center here in the arena lobby. So please feel free to avail of it at 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 5 days a week. We also, of course, want to encourage anyone to come out on Saturday, June 22nd from 12 to 1:30 for our Indigenous gathering space. There's a fundraising event at the Arboretum, and tickets are available on Eventbrite. Canada Day is in Riverside Park. Once again this year, volunteers are encouraged, and I know the Parks and Rec staff who are overseeing Canada Day are keen to welcome a few more. And then finally, just as my council colleagues know, earlier today, we were very excited to announce a permanent home for Kemptville campus for the French Catholic School, Le Conseil des Écoles Catholiques du Centre-Est. And we also have entered into an MOU to explore the feasibility of a multi-recreational year-round sports dome. So with that, I will call our meeting to order, and I'll ask a council colleague to once again read the land acknowledgement, because we are in a separate meeting distinct from Committee of Adjustment. Would anyone like to read the land acknowledgement? Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Go ahead.
Thank you. Could Chloe put that up, or whoever's with Chloe, could
You know
you
what?
put it up on the screen, please?
Okay, and I have a paper copy, but if Chloe can do it, that's fine too. All right,
Thank
there
you.
you go.
The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the territory of the Anishinaabe. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship, and we commit to Indigenous-informed decision-making to foster the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. We appreciate that. Approval of the agenda, colleagues. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda.
I will move.
Great, thank you, Councillor Sullivan, and a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just adjusting my screen because you all disappeared momentarily. There you are. Okay. So any concerns about the agenda, colleagues? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Excellent. That carries.
Aye.
Thank you. We're now moving on. We do not have a closed session this evening. I'll look to any disclosures of interest for perceived or real financial benefit or loss arising from any item on the agenda this evening. Seeing none, we'll go to our consent agenda. There are no presentations or delegations. As you know, items listed on the consent agenda are considered routine or no longer require further discussion and are enacted in one motion. The exception to this rule, of course, is that a member may pull any item for discussion and vote on it separately. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the, oh, I apologize, Councillor Sullivan, go ahead. I'm just seeing your hand. Oh, and you're muted. Councillor Sullivan, there
Sorry.
you go.
Okay, sorry. I think the minutes from May the 8th were on the consent agenda, and I just have a question about one item on those minutes, the minutes of May the 8th.
So let's just pull them and then we'll address those minutes
Okay,
under our
thank you.
consent. No problem. Any other proposed amendments to the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the amended consent agenda. Thank you. Councillor Strachian, Councillor Wilson. Thank you. All right, I'm going to call the question on the consent agenda. All in favor? Good. That carries. And then we appreciate that. We'll go down to the minutes section. And Councillor Sullivan, you're now welcome to ask your question in regards to the May 8th minutes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And my question is regarding the Shalom Small Homes. There was a notice of motion regarding municipal fees, and a question I had asked regarding the Housing Accelerator Fund. There was no answer noted in those minutes to that question, and I understood that there would be a return, that we'd ended up deferring it, asking staff to return a report on the relief of fees. And I'm just wondering when that would be, and because I think it was very time sensitive that we make this decision. So those were my questions.
I'm going to turn to, would it be Ms. Dunlop, Ms. Preston? Ms. Martin is also here. Is anyone equipped to speak to that?
I apologize, Madam Mayor. I'm not clear on Councillor O'Sullivan's question. I believe that the meeting, whose minutes have not risen yet, we actually heard the relief on May 13th. So those subsequent minutes will rise very shortly at a future council meeting, but this was encompassed in that meeting. But I'm not sure if your question is specifically with regards to the financial implications of the specific reserve fund. And if that is the case, then it is my understanding that the finance department is intending to come later in the quarter with a fully encompassed financial report. CIO Dunlop may be able to correct me on that, but I'm happy to answer either way, or if you have any further questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Preston. When I was reading these, it said that I had asked about the Housing Accelerator Fund, and there was no response, no answer to that question, whereas in most other minutes, if someone asks a question, then the answer is recorded. So my question then was, what was the answer? and what was going to be the next step. However, May 13th, I was not here and those minutes aren't in there. So obviously it was addressed and I just didn't see those minutes. So because they're not here yet. So apologies, that obviously the answer is coming.
Apologies, through you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to circulate the draft minutes to you, Councillor Wilson, Councillor O'Sullivan, sorry, and we can clear that up. I believe that we did find a reserve fund to assist with this, but I don't believe that it was half. We did find reserve funds to assist with this.
Okay.
And also Housing Accelerator Fund. So maybe, Ms. Preston, moving forward, we could get some clarity from our finance team or planning development team in terms of how those funds were recovered for the relief of building and related fees. Because I think Councillor Sullivan, fundamentally, that's your question, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So if you wouldn't mind taking note of that and bringing it back to a forthcoming council meeting, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
No problem. Thank you for the question. We appreciate the diligence. So moving onwards, we have no reports.
I apologize, Madam Mayor, because the minutes were pulled from consent, we will have to vote on them separately.
Thank
I
you.
apologize.
Okay. All right. Councillor Sullivan, with your indulgence, would you mind moving the adoption of those minutes?
Yes.
Understanding that there will be follow-up. Okay, thank you. A seconder, please, among council. Excellent. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And I'll call the question on those minutes. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. And then moving on, of course, we have 3 planning development matters here this evening. Are these all public meetings, Ms. Preston?
Just the first 2, Madam Mayor.
All right. And then maybe I'll ask you to read the public meeting script because I don't have it as part of my agenda.
No problem. I will pull that up momentarily. Just one moment, ma'am.
I'm happy to read it for the subsequent 2 if you can just send it to me by email. Oh, wait now. I apologize. I do have it right here.
Oh, good.
I just
Sorry.
found it. Okay.
No
Thank you.
problem.
So I apologize. We are now going, just going to make sure that they're, so the first 2 are the ones for which there's a public meeting, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. So then council will now hold a public meeting to consider an application for lands described as part of lot 2425 concession 2, Geographic Township of Oxford Riudo, now the municipality of North Grenville, to reduce the minimum lot area for townhouse dwellings. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions at this meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the Ontario Land Tribunal may refuse to consider objections. Any persons who wish further notice of council's decision should obviously provide their coordinates to our planning staff. And might I ask, is the applicant or are there members of the public here for this particular application? Do we have any members of the public or the applicant? I'm not seeing anyone.
Hi, Mayor Pickford. Olivia Hughes from Mattamy. I'm here.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Olivia. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. All right. So with that, I think we're inviting Ms. Martin, or is it Mr. Mosher this evening?
It's me, Your Worship, for this one.
Okay, welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yes, so the purpose of this application is relatively minor in nature, and it's to reduce the minimum lot area for townhouse dwellings at the subject properties. If we could advance to the next slide, please. Yes, so it's 2 blocks within the Oxford Village Phase 1 subdivision. This area had previously been the subject of a zone amendment in 2021, which varied zone standards within the R3-18-H zone category. Again, it would be this minor reduction in lot area for townhouse dwellings, and the application is subject to a concurrent application for site plan control. It would see that the property is developed for 44 back-to-back townhouse units and 15 traditional townhouse units. The overall density of the block is a blended rate of 54 units per gross hectare. And it uses the rate that's over the entire Phase 1 Oxford Village subdivision property. So it will not exceed maximums within the official plan. If we could go to the next slide, please. We've received an application form, planning rationale, design brief, site plan, transportation brief, and drawing set with this application. We could go to the next slide. In terms of where we are, it's these two stars showing block 108 and 116 in the southwest corner of Oxford Village Phase 1. You see Somerville Road that's proceeding southerly from the area, and then County Road 43 as an east-west corridor road. So that just helps to orient a little bit of where this is. Next slide, please. And again, this shows the concept plans for the development, the back-to-back townhomes within Block 108, some back-to-back townhomes within Block 116, as well as townhouse dwellings kind of ringing around the outside. Next slide, please. The subject property is within lands that are designated as residential under North Grenville's official plan. And that's the only significant or notable feature. There had previously been a water course on portions of this land, but that has been modified through permit from the Conservation Authority. So that now is at a different location relative to this map that you're looking at. Next slide, please. And this is again the zone map. So you see the area which is zoned R3-18-H, just into the southwest. Again, this is a little bit fuzzy, but it's that area that's in the loop of Patrick Street and then a little bit north of Patrick Street as well. And this is excerpted from our zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. In terms of our policy analysis, even though this is considered to be minor, we did a full policy analysis looking at the provincial policy statement, our official plan, the Leeds and Grenville official plan, and the applicant also made specific reference to the developer's guide and housing reports upon making their application. In general, this application is seen to be consistent with the PPS. It's planned in an urban serviced area, which is to be the focus of growth. It's planning for multimodal transportation networks, infrastructure, and facilities to service the needs of the community. It plans infrastructure in keeping with the master servicing report and proposes to integrate green infrastructure with stormwater planning. And it proposes land use densities and patterns that minimize length and number of vehicle trips and could support future transit or active transportation. And finally, it is planned in an area outside natural hazards and heritage features. Within the county's official plan, there's not a ton to say about the application from that policy document, but some key points are that this does promote a complete, healthy, and vibrant community occurring within a settlement area, which is to be the focus of growth. And it does efficiently use land infrastructure and public service facilities. Again, finally, this is, I think, most notably for North Grenville's official plan in a special policy area. And that would see that this development is established as a holistic group for no more than 449 dwelling units. It previously had received draft plan approval several times, and I believe that they're on the path towards registration currently. It's furthering the vision of our plan, proposing a unit mix that meets or exceeds municipal density targets. We do have a bit of an oversupply of singles and lower density types of dwellings, so this helps to provide a range of choice for individuals moving to the community as meeting with the targets of our plan. It's in an identified area for growth. It's consistent with the Northwest Quadrant concept plan, and it does provide this appropriate mix. The only standard, again, that's proposed to be varied is the minor zone standard of a reduction in lot area for the townhouse dwelling. My understanding of that is it's to achieve just more market demands and fluctuations, and that is why that is desired. If we could go to the final slide, please. So it is the recommendation of staff to approve this amendment. It's again, a minor text change that's consistent with the PPS and North Grenville and county's official plans, in my opinion. That concludes the report, but I'm happy to answer questions if there's any.
Great, thank you. I'll go to Councillor O'Sullivan. She's got her hand up. Oh, Councillor O'Sullivan, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Mosher and Olivia from Mattamy Homes. Nice to see your face. You mentioned the transportation brief. I didn't actually get a chance to look at that, but does this change involve increased density then? Because you mentioned that this could be result in a total of 449 dwelling units in phase of Oxford Village. And that's a complete, healthy, vibrant community. And having, I sit on the Health, Wellness and Fitness Active Transportation Advisory Committee, and we are very concerned with the growth out past County Road 44, where there is limited active transportation at this point in time until County Road 43 is expanded, which does not have any foreseeable date for that. So there's no opportunities for multi-use paths along 43 until such time as that 43 expansion happens, who knows when. So the building is already going on. People will be moving there, people will be living there, and we need to have established active transportation options and safe ways for people to cross County Road 43, because we know they're going to cross County Road 43 and they need safe ways to get connected with the rest of the urban area. So the Active Transportation Health and Wellness Committee is very strong in terms of wanting some connections. So the pathway that's proposed to go down to Pensier all the way to where Food Basics is, and then extend out to County Road 43, that is something that I believe that council has the opportunity to say no to any further expansion until we have a guarantee that that connection will be made around about the same time as the building is going on. Does that make sense?
So why don't we ask maybe Mr. Mosher or Ms. Dunlop to speak to connectivity between this emerging subdivision and the rest of the community effectively. Ms. Dunlop, I know you've spoken in the past about connection points, particularly pedestrian pathways.
At this point in time, and Phil, please fill in the blanks when I'm done, the connection between Tempo subdivision and OVI is, at this point in time, it's a gravel path, that it is not a paved MUP. It's not a paved or a concrete sidewalk. The idea is that it is the water and sewer lines which will serve OVI and the connection to the municipal water and sewer systems in its entirety. And there will be connections in between Tempo and OVI in the future. But this gravel full road width will be available for pedestrian and a cycling connectivity. It is not, but as I said, it's not a recognized paved MUP or a concrete sidewalk. It will, when the individual lands develop between the two, when all that land is developed, there will be a full connection from OVI through Tempo down County Road 44. That doesn't specifically identify the County Road 43 connection. At this point in time, we don't have sufficient lands on 43, just as we're seeing on County Road 43 between 44 and Colonnade. That will have both sides a full multi-use path for pedestrian and cyclists to utilize and be a very good connection. But we do have some disconnects for the interim. Phil, if you want to fill in any other gaps.
I think the only thing to maybe add is that this blocks 108 and 116 themselves will not be developed for 449 units. Rather, that is the entire total number of units within the Oxford Village Phase 1 subdivision in its entirety. So I think it's 59 units within these two blocks. They are part of the sidewalk and road networks, and then those connected to other spine and sidewalk and road networks within the draft approved plan of subdivision for Oxford Village Phase 1. So that connectivity within the subdivision will exist as it begins to be built out.
Okay, thank you for that. So connectivity within the subdivision, like within it, is good, but our concern is connectivity to other parts of the urban area. So if that gravel path albeit not a paved MUP, but it's a gravel path that people can walk or cycle on to get from Oxford Village Phase 1 to Tempo or to the Depensier, where it is behind Food Basics. If the extension, even if it's still gravel and not a formal sidewalk, multi-use path, whatever, out to County Road 43 at Pine Hill with a crosswalk at Pine Hill, that is what the Health, Wellness, Fitness, Active Transportation would really like to see. We really want to see some options for people who are going to be moving there, rather than have to, as we have been doing for the last few years, play catch up, where subdivisions were built without any connectivity to the urban core. And so have some options right at the get-go, knowing and recognizing that the formal MUPs down County Road 43 will not happen for unforeseeable number of years. So we need to do something at the same time, not have to catch up after. And the committee feels very strongly about that.
Indeed. And maybe I could just jump in because of course it took quite a bit of heavy lifting to get the current section of County Road 43 underway, maybe 15 years. So of course we want to accelerate those timelines at Councillor O'Sullivan 100%. So I think certainly the conversations that Karen has had with the County Public Works team and that I have had informally definitely highlight the imperative to continue that connectivity that we're building on 43 all the way down for the reasons you've suggested. In the meantime, it sounds like there is some connectivity to Tempo, which does have obviously sidewalks and links nicely to the 44 multi-use pathway, and will link also to that newly established multi-use pathway on either side of 43. So at least I think there are some options until we gear up for phase 2 of 43 and give people a little relief from the construction cycle that we'll all be under for the next 2 years.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. However, we know that people from Tempo are taking their lives in their hands and zipping across 43 right now to get to the Kemptville Mall. So a crosswalk at County Road or a crosswalk at Pine Hill is recommended by the Health Wellness, and I believe that Director Finley is aware of that and has said that's very feasible. And so an establishment of even a stone dust gravel path from County Road 43 to Depensier that will then connect to Oxford Village Phase 1 as a gravel path until such time could, they need some options. We're not waiting 15 years for the.
Certainly not. I hope we never have to wait 15 years again. So, but Ms. Dunlop has her hand up, so she might be able to address that a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I can raise this with Director Finley, and we can see about options in regards to the 2025 capital program and bring it back at budget deliberation time.
Great. And specifically, it's the PXO, correct? So,
yes, Madam Mayor, it would be a PXO in cooperation with the county, of course, because we'd be crossing a county road, right, and the gravel pathway up the unmaintained section of Pine Hill.
That's right. Okay. Good. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan, Ms. Councillor Sullivan. Ms. Hughes, I just have one question, and that's in regards to some play facilities within Mattamy. We understand that there's a very generous and large wetlands area for which there will be sort of passive recreational options. I certainly, especially with the additional density of townhomes, and often those are starter homes for families with young children or individuals who are planning to have families. I'm a little bit concerned, given a lack of robust connectivity with, my question is, and I know we've had this discussion before, I think that Mattamy and the municipality were having some conversations about establishing some play facilities for families with young children within the subdivision itself, given some of the limitations of taking kids in strollers and kids on bikes, through other subdivisions to get to play structures that are a little further afield. Can you speak to that in regards to where we are with phase one?
Yeah, we have not advanced conversations very far, but we have looked at additional landscaping with Ms. Martin and some of the Parks and Rec staff. So through that process, we'd be happy to look at adding some play facilities in that wetland area, as we've discussed.
And maybe, I don't know, Ms. Martin, if you're in a position, or Mr. Mosher, just to speak to play facilities. Obviously we've seen circumstances where we've had to go back and retroactively build play facilities where none were anticipated or planned. And just given this additional density, I think it just prompts one to ask that question again in terms of Mattamy and the municipality working together to ensure sufficient play structures for young families.
Certainly, Your Worship, I can just quickly jump in. Certainly under our tenure, being here for the past 5 years and working with this council, it's been quite clear that ensuring that there's adequate park facilities and space within our newer communities coming forward is established. It is something that we've identified in our design guidelines that we note with developers, and we always have those conversations as to what those opportunities could look like as we move forward in the future. It is difficult for some of these subdivisions that have been lingering. The original approval for this one dated back to 2017. So prior to this council's time and prior to the staff sitting at this table actively working on this file. So it's something that as we move forward with new development, we do flag and look for those opportunities to take if 5% of the land is parkland or a combination as parkland and cash in lieu of parkland. And in certain circumstances, we've worked with some of the developers to front end some of the park development so that they're building it at the start and not at the end of the project.
Indeed, but with that said, my understanding is Mattamy and the municipality had an opportunity on a small part of municipal land in front of the newly built well to potentially identify a small play facility for families with young children. We saw in Tempo that families were feeling extremely concerned that they had no gathering place within their neighborhood. And that was less than 200 families with 450 households expected in phase one. I still need to ask the question of whether or not there is an appetite for the municipality and Mattamy to work together on some play facilities, because it was my understanding that there was goodwill on both sides to go down that path. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, and certainly it's conversations that staff have had with Mattamy and will continue to have with Mattamy as to how we can make a park facility work within the context of the blocks that are being deeded to the municipality. And I also do want to note that phase 2 also includes a park, and understanding the walking path around the wetland feature is not a park, but it is also a recreation amenity that is being provided. So as we continue to, as Oxford Village continues to build out in subsequent phases, there will be consideration for how we can incorporate more public space into the future phases, as well as retroactively go back and find a way to create something within phase 1.
Yes, and maybe into the future, we can have our Director of Parks and Rec speak to plans for that phase 1, if it's a shared initiative in terms of a play facility. I can't imagine that years down the road, and we may not be here as elected officials, but as phase 1 gears up, that we won't receive a lot of communications from new residents looking for some of those play facilities. So I'm saying, while we have Ms. Hughes here this evening, that I think there is a exceedingly strong appetite to plan accordingly in phase 1, given the number of families you expect to welcome some play facilities. We recognize the exceptional passive recreation that you're offering, but I don't think that it is adequate given the market that you're seeking to attract for some of your homes. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. With your indulgence, I wondered if I could ask a question, a general question about cash in lieu of parkland. I hear
Indeed.
I hear the figure, and I guess this is directed to Miss Martin or possibly Ms. Dunlop. Um, I hear I hear 5% all the time. Is that like a provincial standard or a cap, or is this something we have some discretion over? Could it be 6? Could it be 7%?
I'll handle this one, Your Worship. It's legislated by the Planning Act. So 5% cash in lieu parkland is a legislated requirement that the municipality can impose on developers for parkland, whether it's physical land or cash in lieu, or a combination of both.
So we can't exceed 5%.
We can't exceed what is legislated now.
Okay.
I mean, and sorry, I just want to add, unless a developer wants to give more, I mean, but that would be something we could negotiate, but that would be, again, at the discretion of the developer as part of that process. But 5% is the legislated requirement that we can go up to.
Okay, thank you.
And in this case, you're saying that the Phase 1 Mattamy Homes development has met and in fact exceeded that 5% parkland? Is that what I'm hearing, Ms. Martin?
My understanding, and pardon me, in the sense that I wasn't here when the original approval was given, but that the parkland block is the wetland piece that was given. And without having the calculation to say whether or not that exceeds the 5%, that the way the draft conditions were written was that the wetland piece was the parkland dedication. So there was no cash in lieu being provided.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. So with that in mind, I'll look, we are in the public portion of our meeting, and I'll just look for any other questions from council colleagues. Is there anything else in regards to this matter? Ms. Hughes, do you have anything else to add as the applicant?
Nothing to add. No, thank you.
Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to close the public meeting. I would like Ms. Dunlop or Ms. Preston, however, to take note of, I think, 2 requests that have emerged from our discussion, one of which is around a PXO, and appreciate Ms. Dunlop, your commitment there. And if we could have a report from Director Guy on potential plans for a play facility at some point in the fall, that would also be much appreciated. Thank you. With that, I'm going to put our ask for council colleagues to put our motion on the table through a mover and a seconder, and that is that council approved bylaw 4824 being a bylaw to reduce the minimum lot area for townhouse dwellings at the subject lands, more specifically described as part of lot 2425 concession 2, geographic township of Oxford and Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville. Can I have?
Also move.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Strachan, thank you. Anything else, colleagues, you'd like to add? Seeing nothing, then I will call the question. All in favor, please. Thank you. That carries. So next we are going to move to our second public meeting. Council will now hold a public meeting to consider an application for lands located at 1055 County Road 43, part of Lot 10, Concession 2, former Township of Oxford and Rideau, now the municipality of North Grenville, to increase lot coverage of an accessory structure or structures. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have. If an appellant does not provide oral submissions or written submissions before council adopts an amendment, the Ontario Lands Tribunal may refuse to consider objections. Obviously, any person wishing notice of tonight's outcome should advise our planning staff who are with us this evening. Are there people here for this public meeting? Is the applicant? Yep.
Through your worship, I'm Chris Clark with Xander Plan. I'm the agent for the applicant.
Great. Excellent. Is anyone else here for this application? Is there any member of the public here? Not seeing anyone? Oh, I apologize.
Sorry, I'm the applicant, Randy Young.
Oh, hi, Randy. Okay, you
Hi.
are the applicant. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Trust you. We've kept you entertained while you've been waiting. So we are going to turn this over to Ms. Martin or Mr. Mosher.
I'll be handling this one, Your Worship.
Okay, Ms. Martin, go ahead.
Correct. So our final public meeting this evening is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment for the property located at 1550 County Road 43. Next slide, please. So the property is currently zoned agriculture 1 and designated agriculture as per official plan. The property is around 1.21 hectares in size, so about 3 acres. It is currently used for residential purposes, and it also has accessory structures and an accessory use on the property. The surrounding land uses include agricultural operations, including cash cropping, and residential uses. Next slide, please. There's the location of the property. It is west of the town of Kemptville on County Road 43 on the north side. And as you can see, there's evidence of smaller lots, which are used for residential purposes, as well as larger land holdings, which are under agricultural production. Next slide, please. And this is a Google photo of the property showing the house, which is where the little pin drop is, as well as the accessory structures on the property currently. Next slide, please. And here's a site plan as to the accessory structures that exist, as well as a proposed new location of a summer kitchen workshop, as well as the existing house on the property. Next slide, please. So in our policy analysis, we looked at the provincial policy statements, and staff are confident that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment meets the intent of the provincial policy statement. Agricultural land use policies require the protection of prime agricultural areas for long-term use. This is a smaller lot within the agricultural area, and the proposed increase in lot coverage for accessory structures is within keeping of the policy. Next slide, please. There are a lot of similar policies with the United Counties official plan as well as the provincial policy statement. The property is designated agriculture under the county's official plan, and staff are confident that the proposed increase in lot coverage is in conformity with the county's official plan. Next slide, please. And similar to the county's official plan, we have policies that reflect each other, and staff are confident that the proposed lot coverage increase meets the intent of our official plan. Next slide, please. So in looking at the proposed construction of the summer kitchen workshop, as well as the other accessory structures on the property, 3% of the lot area of 1.218 hectares is 365 square meters. So the lot coverage of all the accessory structures when added up is 645 square meters, which equates to about a 5.3% lot coverage for the property. I do want to note the chart does show a higher value, but that also includes the principal and accessory uses. And in total, the proposed accessory structure, existing accessory structures, and the house are under the total lot coverage for the agricultural zone. So it's just the accessory structure lot provision that they are looking to increase. Next slide, please. So the exception zone that's being sought through a zoning bylaw amendment would be to increase the maximum lot coverage for all accessory structures for a lot greater than 0.4 hectares or 1 acre in size to 5.5%. We did increase it slightly from 5.3 to 5.5 to allow for a little leeway as the structure is being built. So that way, if it is a little larger than what was predicted, there is some room to adjust those design plans, and we're not having to come back to council to readjust. Next slide, please. We did not receive any inquiries at the time of the report submission or up until this meeting. Next slide, please. And we did not receive any agency comments. We did pre-consult with the counties to ensure that a traffic brief wasn't required, as part of the expansion is to help facilitate the property owner's his home-based business where he stores and warehouses protective equipment for firefighters that is used, and he sends them to underserved countries. So it was determined just based on the volume of what he does, and that it's more of a one-man operation. The counties are satisfied that a traffic brief wasn't required. And I believe if we go to the next slide, that should be the end of the presentation, and it is staff's recommendation that council enact a bylaw to amend the zoning for 1550 County Road 43 to create that special exception zone to allow for that increase in lot coverage. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, colleagues? And I apologize. I should have gone to the applicant or the applicant's representative. Is there anything you'd like to add at this stage before I go to council colleagues? Mr. Clark, Mr. Young?
Through you, Your Worship, I just want to reiterate one point Amy did touch on. There is a provision in the accessory use section of the zoning bylaw that says in no case shall lot coverage exceed the maximum set out in the zone. And I just want to reiterate that once the summer kitchen is relocated to the middle of the lot, we'll be well under the maximum 15% lot coverage, will be roughly 6.05%. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Anything else from the applicant? Mr. Young, are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, great. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Martin. I have no problem or issues with the amendment, but I'm curious. I'm very familiar with summer kitchens and what they were used for, but it seems to me there's a is it true there's a distinct definition in the Planning Act or the Building Code about summer kitchens? I'm just curious why it's described that way.
So the information that was received from the applicant and their agent was that that was the intended purpose. I'm not overly familiar with the definitions under the Ontario Building Code in regards to the differences, and would need to consult with our building division to get you that answer. But ultimately, when the Mr. Young does come forward for his building permit, he'll have to meet the requirements of the building code for what he is proposing.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Anything else, council colleagues? I just have one question. So staff don't have the discretion even when the lot coverage variation is just from 3% to 5.5%. Staff don't have the discretion to accord that variation. It must come to council, even though it's such a minimal modification, if you will. Is that right, Ms. Martin?
That is correct. As that value is established in a bylaw that is established by council, it must be considered as a resolution of council to make an amendment to that bylaw, or in certain cases, a minor variance. In some circumstances, we've had matters as small as 0.5 of a meter come for council's decision. So sometimes it may seem like a small variance. In certain cases, it might not be. But again, as established in the zoning bylaw, if there's any changes to that, staff don't have the discretion. It would be council's.
Right. And as we look towards a new official plan, would we potentially contemplate whether or not we'd want to establish a higher or lower threshold, if you will, in regards to some of these matters?
Certainly, council can at any time bring a notice of motion to ask staff to look at minimum and maximum permitted lot coverages. That would be more dictated through the zoning bylaw itself than it would be the official plan, which is a more of a higher level policy document. But at any time, if it's council's desire for staff to look at what our minimum and maximum lot coverages for accessory structures, more so maybe for some of our larger lots, it's certainly something that we could put some consideration around.
I only ask because we're a heavily rural and agricultural area, so this can't be the first time something like this would emerge where perhaps our threshold historically may be more conservative than the times allow. I don't really know, but I know that the process of coming towards council or before council for a matter such as this can be extensive. So I would just like to note to my council colleagues that perhaps we should give some consideration to working with staff to maybe look at where we've seen committee of adjustment, or in this case zoning bylaw applications. Perhaps we can look at what sort of the era we're in now may be better suited for, because obviously it is time consuming to bring these applications forward, certainly for the applicant and for staff. So if there were no other comments, council, and I'm not seeing any hands, then I would look to close the public meeting. And I will just reiterate the recommendation, and that is that council approve and enact bylaw 4724 to amend the zoning for 1055 County Road 43 from agricultural 1 to agricultural 1 exception 12, A112, to increase lot coverage of accessory structures from 3 to 5.5%. And I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Thank you. Councilors Barclay and Wilson. And Ms. Martin, of course, if we do it in this case, then that precedent wouldn't apply to another application because these are site-specific exceptions. Is that right?
That is correct. We take in each application on a case-by-case basis, but certainly we may look to other instances where
Right.
we've made decisions in this matter. And I just want to just kind of reiterate to council that in the past, we have brought forward some amendments in regards to accessory structures. We used to have a maximum requirement of all accessory structure footprints couldn't exceed 1,076 square feet. So certainly we saw that as a barrier because we bring a lot of minor variances for that. So we'll keep note, and we do keep note of the things that kind of continually come up, and we do make revisions through housekeeping amendments as needed.
Certainly, I think it's worthy of consideration, whether or not we need to do a little more tweaking. But I have the motion on the table. Any final comments from council colleagues? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please. That carries. Thank you. All right, Mr. Young and the applicant, the applicant's representative, Mr. Clark, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you for your time as well.
All right. All right, so carrying on with our agenda, we have, I believe, a presentation on something that I've heard a lot about and look forward to an overview on the administrative monetary penalty system. And I believe that we have Mr. Barabo here this evening.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Staff completed a comprehensive review of available bylaw enforcement methods available and recommends that Council implements an administrative monetary penalty system, which is also known as AMPS. Next slide, please. AMPS is a method that is imposed by a municipality to deter violations of municipal bylaws. It creates an efficient and effective way to gain compliance. It helps resolve parking and minor bylaw infractions. Next slide, please. In most cases, it would replace the current Provincial Offences Act model for prosecution via the normal court system. AMPS would have a very similar process, but it is managed by bylaw services and staff here at the municipality. This system has been adopted by many municipalities within Ontario. Next slide, please. These are some of the municipalities before you here that have implemented AMPS. Just to show a few. Next slide, please. And why to implement AMPS? Well, residents can resolve minor bylaw matters in a more convenient, approachable, and less intimidating manner. The municipality can resolve these minor bylaw infractions in a timely manner. It reduces costs associated with court proceedings. It reduces the burden on the judicial system, and it encourages compliance. Next slide, please. Now, AMPS kind of replaces the traditional ticket or provincial offenses notice, and it replaces it with a penalty notice. And that is very much the same. It requires a payment of a penalty instead of a fine. And they are issued for minor violations such as parking enforcement or investigations under property standards, yards, noise complaints, if there are grounds and compliance is not achieved. Bylaw Services Officer can still proceed under Provincial Offences Act for more serious matters, which would compel the violator to court. Those are the matters that are larger where we're not receiving compliance. Next slide, please. In regards to process, the bylaw officer would issue a penalty notice. The resident or the defendant could decide to pay that penalty. They can request a review, and that review would be in person, or they can apply online as well if the municipality chooses to go that route where they can apply or attend in person. They would speak to a screening officer, and if the resident does not agree with the decision of the screening officer, they can request a hearing, which is very similar to a formal trial, but it would be done by a third party. Next slide, please. The hearing officer, as I said, is a third party who reviews the evidence and can decide to affirm, amend, or rescind the penalty. A hearing officer may also provide additional time to pay. A penalty can be paid online, by mail, or in person. Next slide, please. Today, I'm presenting different options to council. There's 3 options. This main one that we're kind of recommending is option number 2, is to direct staff to implement AMPS. This is the expedited version. It would endorse the engagement of a specialized contractor to undertake the comprehensive review of all of our bylaws, and to direct the mayor and municipal clerk to enter into new agreements with the Ministry of Transportation for access to ARIS. And ARIS is a system that utilizes queries license plates. The other options, option number 1, is very similar, but staff would be undertaking the comprehensive review, which would take more time and make the proper amendments to implement AMPS. The third option is to remain with the current system through the Provincial Offences Court, which has both advantages and disadvantages again. Any questions?
Great, thank you, Mr. Baribeau, for your presentation. I see Deputy Mayor and Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Mr. Baribeau. I'm with the 3 options. Obviously, at least from my perspective, that option 3 is off the table. So I think the AMP system makes a lot of sense in all cases. But am I understanding that the bylaw division is currently not sufficiently resourced to handle option 1?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Through option 1, it would take a lot more time to review every bylaw and make the necessary changes. All our bylaws, or the majority of them, are quite dated. They need to be modernized. And if staff were to do that, it would take a longer period of time. Hiring a professional that's done this over and over would expedite it quite quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Baribeau. Perhaps I missed this, but who is the screening officer? Where does that level come in?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The screening officer could be municipal staff. We don't recommend it necessarily to be a bylaw services member, but would be someone here at the municipality that would have proper training. There would be policies and procedures in place to guide that member. And I would recommend to have 2 members trained in case one's away. Screenings to be done on a scheduled basis. Perhaps I suggest maybe once or twice every a month, and they can be screened at that time and have their time to speak with a screening officer.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe just a note that certainly in speaking with my county colleagues, not just in Leeds and Grenville, but across across Eastern Ontario, and I know, Ms. Preston, you came from a municipality where AMPS was well established. A number of our neighbors have had AMPS for quite some time and have very, very positive things to say about it. The Provincial Offences Court is a protracted, lengthy process, and unfortunately, it doesn't provide good access to justice. Certainly not here in North Grenville, where people have to either travel to be in person to court in Brockville, or can connect by phone or by Zoom. But given some of our broadband challenges, that can be a very fragmented and I think unsatisfying experience. So what I have heard from my county colleagues when it comes to AMPS is it allows for the administration of justice in a way that is fair, it is fast, and I think ultimately allows the municipality to administer fines in a way where we're not waiting many, many years in some cases to collect on these fines. Currently, the counties is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to collect. It's not sustainable in the long run, but it's part of what is required when you're using Provincial Offences Court. So I just wanted to add that context. I'm very happy to see that Mr. Baribeau, you've obviously done some heavy lifting here, and I know you've been speaking to Ms. Preston a little bit, given her experience with another municipality, but certainly from my perspective, it's a positive way forward. Councillor Strachan?
Yes, thank you. Through Madam Mayor, to Mr. Baribeau. So I just looking at the report, you're estimating about $5,000 or $6,000 to be the costs for the consultant. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is correct. That gives us a little bit of a buffer in regards to unforeseen costs that could come. That the estimates with approximately 50 hours worth of work. That gives a little bit of a buffer to kind of work with.
And so this the review then would be to highlight which bylaws require changes, but then staff would still need to make the changes, correct?
Correct. There would be recommendations. There would be lots of collaboration between staff and that expert member. The necessary changes for AMP to be implemented would be incorporated, and any other changes for modernization, both with suggestions or staff requests, would be put in at that time to update every bylaw.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I guess as a general comment to council colleagues and the public would be that $5,000 to $6,000 is a bargain when it comes to consulting costs, I think, as we've seen. But also this system, I think, is much needed in conversations over the last few years with Mr. Baribeau. It's clear that AMPS is definitely a way to go. And as the mayor has highlighted, that we would bring us in line with many of our neighboring municipalities. And further to that, $5,000 or $6,000 is often easily found in budgets when you get to the end of the year, because of how contracts are not always easy to estimate. So I think this would be a worthy investment.
Great. Anything else, council colleagues, before we move consideration of the recommendation? Not seeing any hands. So I'll just read the recommendation, and that is that council receive the Administrative Monetary Penalty System Options Report, and that council directs staff to proceed in implementing an AMPS program in North Grenville in line with option 2 of this report, including authorizing the mayor and the municipal clerk to enter into new agreements with the Ministry of Transportation for access to ARIS, and that council assign the anticipated consulting costs of between $5,000 and $6,000 for implementation from anticipated year-end surpluses. A mover, please. Councillor Strachan, seconder. Councillor Sullivan, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Baribeau, did I miss your timeline? Apologies. When would you expect, once a consultant was engaged, for those updates to be made, so we would be in a position to launch AMPS?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think further conversations would be required to determine a timeline. I would request maybe early new year.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, any other questions? Seeing none? Well, thank you again, Mr. Baribeau. I know you've only been here for a number of years, and this is a bit of a paradigm shift for sure, but appreciate all of the work and conversation that's gone into this, and thank you to Ms. Preston as well. I'll call the question. All in favor? Good, that carries. Thank you very much. And thank you again. We look forward to hearing which of our bylaws have to change or modernize, Mr. Baribeau, to create the conditions for the next step. I appreciate your time. All right. So carrying on, colleagues, you'll recall that the next two items, K.7.4, K.7.5, have already been dealt with through consent. I do not believe we have anything from Public Works this evening. Is that right, Ms. Dunlop? All right. So other business is, no other businesses, I think, has emerged. Am I correct about that, Ms. Preston?
You are correct, Madam Mayor.
All right. Notice of motions. Any notices of motions this evening? Seeing none, then we'll go to introduction and consideration of bylaws. I believe that we've already addressed these. Is that correct, Ms. Preston?
Yes, ma'am. All four have been addressed this evening.
Great. So questions from members of the public and or the media? I do not believe we have members of the public with us any longer? Good. I don't see anyone, so we're going to go to close of meeting then. Confirmation bylaw. Be it resolved that bylaw 5024 to confirm proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on June 19th, 2024 be adopted and passed. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Wilson, Councillor O'Sullivan. All in favor? Good, thank you. And then adjournment, and that is a resolution to adjourn at this regular meeting of council at 8:27 p.m. Oh, and I apologize, we did have a member of the public here. So before I adjourn, was there a question from a member of the public? I do see Mr. Beveridge here. I'm not seeing Mr. Beveridge turn on his camera. So I'm going to resume with our motion to adjourn, calling the question to adjourn at 8:27 p.m. All in favor?
Yep.
Good. Thank you, council colleagues, for your work this evening. Thank you to staff. Not
Good
bad
night.
for our first virtual meeting in quite some time. So,
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good
take
night.
care. Bye.
Stay cool.